Okay, so here we go. Fred in New York on WOR. You're first to comment right now. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Michael. I'm a strong conservative and a very, very long-time listener of yours, as well as a Catholic. I am opposed to this illegal immigration. However, one point that I've got to disagree with you is that when these illegal immigrants go to church, which I go to every weekend, that they put money into the box. Believe me when I tell you, if these people put in 25 cents, it's a lot. So they are adding nothing to the coffers of the Catholic Church. Believe me when I tell you this.
Fred, I agree with you, and you sound like a very sincere man. Do you know how much money religious organizations make from the federal government through social payments through social organizations? You know, Catholic Charities, for example, is not actually a member. I don't think Catholic Charities is bound by the same strictures as the Catholic Church. It's sort of a separate division that actually can capitalize on federal grants and such. Catholic Charities receives, I believe, tens of millions of dollars from the federal government for its programs.
I really am not sure of that, Michael. You know,
but then again, Fred, Jewish charities also milk the federal government for millions of dollars. You know that as well.
That I did not know. No.
Well, yeah. It's a big business. The whole thing is a big business, but thank you for the call, and thank you for at least hearing me out. 1-800-449-8255, michaelsavage.com. Most of the readers of Der Stürmer were young and people from the lowest class of German society. Copies of Der Stürmer were displayed in prominent display cases throughout the Third Reich. In 1927, Der Stürmer sold about 27,000 copies every week. By 1935, its circulation had reached around 480,000 a week. I have about 8 to 10 million listeners a week. Hermann Göring forbade Der Stürmer in all of his departments. Did you know that? However, other senior Nazi officials, including Heinrich Himmler and Robert Ley and Max Amann, endorsed the publication. And their own statements are often published in this low-class, anti-Semitic journal, Der Stürmer. This is a side note of history. But Hitler considered Streicher's newspaper and his primitive newspaper to be effective in influencing the man on the street. Okay? So that's the story. After the war, Streicher was tried at the Nuremberg trials for crimes against humanity for his role in inciting Germans to exterminate Jews. His publishing activities were a major part of the evidence presented against him. Streicher was found guilty and hanged. That's all. End of story. The only reason I'm bringing up Der Stürmer, something from ancient history for most of us, is because this kind of naked bias that I see in the Wall Street Journal with this article strikes me as familiar territory in that regard. I was shocked by this. You know, I cannot believe that they publish an article called The Minority Court. The only Protestant Supreme Court justice is stepping down how Jews and Catholics came to own the bench. This is amazing, because it's really not about Jews, Catholics, or Protestants. It's about neutral, excellent justices. Very high-end, talented justices. Unlike the affirmative action picks that Obama is going through right now in order to, quote, balance the court. You know, since we have the first affirmative action president in the minds of millions of Americans, I know it's the unspoken reality for millions of Americans. You're not allowed to say that. But we all know that there's something to do with the truth in what I'm saying. You're telling me that Obama didn't get elected because of affirmative action policies? I'll tell you what, I'll present an argument to validate my statement. How do I prove that? Well, I can't prove it. I can only suggest it. Let's go back to his entry into Punahou High School. Then let's go from Punahou High School to Harvard Law School. Then let's go from Harvard Law School to his first positions as a politician. Do you think that race had anything to do with any of those selections or entries? Well, if you do, then you'd agree with me that race had something to do with his ascent so rapidly in politics and to the presidency. Certainly we know that race had something to do with his election, because many white people were fed up with Bush's criminality. Did I say that? Yes, I said that. I believe that Bush was the most horrendous president in American history. In fact, the further away we get from the man, the worse he looks. I know this is sacrilege to the Republican apparatchiks listening to this show, He dragged us into an illegal war in Iraq, and I'm going to tell you something else about that. When I published my book, Liberalism as a Mental Disorder, several years back, I think in 03 or 04, I don't remember. No, that was a later one, maybe 07, 08. I said that the war in Iraq could turn out to be the greatest blunder in American history from a military standpoint if it emboldens Iran. And the reason I wrote that, and I was years ahead of the media, is because although Saddam Hussein was a monster, he was, in essence, a balancing point to control the Shiite population, which was a majority population. As you know, Saddam Hussein was a Sunni Muslim. He was in the minority, and he was brutal. But he used his brutality to control the Shiites. And what you didn't know was that the Iranians are Shiite Muslims, largely. And what Saddam Hussein did, remember he was once our ally, was as a Sunni, he controlled the Shiite population, as I just said. So I speculated that this war in Iraq, in toppling the Sunnis in Iraq, would give the Shiites in Iraq powers that they really never had. And in so doing, we might see a re-emerging Persia. And God in heaven, have I turned out to be right. Does anyone listening to this show argue with me when I say that Iraq is not our friend? Explain this to me. Why is Iraq giving oil contracts to China and Russia? Why has Iraq never paid reparations for their liberation? Why has the United States government never demanded that Iraq pay us back with oil, which they have plenty of? You know, there are many questions that remain unanswered, but I'll continue to ask them so long as we have a free country. But nevertheless, let's go back to my main position, which is Bush is the worst president in American history. He dragged us into an illegal war, and he has emboldened Iran, creating, in essence, a new Persia. Number two, he destroyed the economy through drunken spending to buy off the voters. And he left us with $1 trillion deficit, and that, of course, led us to elect the unknown and the unaccomplished Obama to the presidency, because the people didn't want Bush 2 in the form of McCain. They knew that if we got McCain, we'd have Christopher Cox back at the SEC. The people just knew this. They intuitively knew it, and they wanted somebody to come and clean it up. Little did they know that it would get worse, not better. I'll be right back.